Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going deep on something, well, kind of unnerving.
Unnerving. Yeah, that's one word for it.
We're talking propaganda,
Yeah.
but not, the dusty old history books kind. This is about, right now, the information warfare stuff happening all around us.
Yeah, and it's the kind of thing, you can fall down a rabbit hole for hours on your phone and still just be scratching the surface. It's big.
Exactly. And we've got a ton of research here, actually. Articles, studies, even some of your own notes, all about how this modern propaganda works.
Well, look at how it impacts democracies, because it really does, in ways most people wouldn't even believe.
It's chilling.
Hmm.
But also, we've got some hopeful strategies for fighting back in here, too, which is important.
Yeah, because the thing is, it's not just about, spotting lies anymore. Anyone can do that sometimes. This is about how information, even stuff that seems harmless, is weaponized. It's subtle, but it changes how you think, how you act. Like, you ever get that feeling that your smart speaker is listening to you? It's like that, but it's the entire internet. And the stakes, way higher than just getting targeted ads.
You're not wrong. It's a war for your mind. And the battlefields, well, most people don't even know they exist.
Okay, so let's set the scene. You sent over some really interesting research about algorithms, about how our personalized feeds have basically become breeding grounds for this stuff.
Right. Think about it. How often do you click on something because it's tailored to your interests, and then later you realize, wait a minute, this was pushing an agenda? It's insidious.
They're good. Scary good at getting us to click. I was looking at one of these articles you sent. There's a study analyzed thousands of social media posts. They found that fear-mongering, especially about political stuff, way more shareable than anything neutral, anything fact-based.
Oh, I remember that one. Made me think of those notes you had from the 2016 election. You know how foreign actors use social media to essentially manipulate voters? They tapped into those anxieties we all have, immigration, the economy.
It's like they took our fears, amplified them, turned them into weapons. And it wasn't about outright lies either. It was about making people doubt everything, doubt themselves, who to trust, what's real, the whole nine yards.
Exactly. And that's where this whole gaslighting thing comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's terrifyingly relevant now in this context.
Gaslighting. I thought that was like a personal thing, like in a bad relationship or something.
It can be. But what's scary is you highlighted this research about how certain news outlets, they're using these gaslighting techniques on a huge scale. Mass manipulation.
Wait, really? How does that even work with media and propaganda?
Okay, so think about it. With gaslighting, there's denial, right?
Yeah.
Presenting lies as truth, making you, the victim, doubt your own sanity.
Okay, yeah, I see where you're going with this.
So picture this, a news channel. Every day it reports on events, but it contradicts what you know, what you've seen. After a while, it messes with your head. You start to question everything, and you rely on that source even more. It's insidious.
So they're creating this like false reality, and we're living in it.
That's it. And this whole blurring of what's real, what's not, it's dangerous, man. It erodes our shared reality, the foundation of any functioning democracy.
It's like they're chipping away at the bedrock of society, and nobody even notices.
Exactly. And what's even scarier, this fusion of entertainment and news, it's everywhere.
Ugh, tell me about it. Half the time I don't know if I'm watching a news report or some reality TV drama.
Right. But that's not an accident. Think back on that research. Some of these networks, they're packaging biased narratives as objective truth. It's about entertainment over facts.
Because outrage sells. Plain and simple, it keeps us glued, keeps us clicking, even if it's like journalistic suicide.
Exactly. It's a dangerous game, and we're all caught in the crossfire.
Man, this is heavy stuff. It's like we're surrounded by these invisible forces, and we're just pawns in their game.
I know it feels that way,
Yeah.
but we're not powerless. Knowledge, that's our defense. We
Yeah.
got to arm ourselves.
That's why we're doing this, right? To shine a light on all this. Give people the tools to fight back. So we've been talking about, how this whole digital world with all its algorithms and whatnot has become a breeding ground for propaganda. It's pretty disheartening, to be honest.
It can be, yeah. It's easy to feel like we're, fighting a losing battle.
Right. But in all the research you sent over, it wasn't all doom and gloom. There was stuff about how propaganda can actually be used for good, which I have to admit, kind of surprised me.
It's true. Propaganda itself, it's not inherently good or evil. It's a tool, really. And like any tool, it depends on who's using it and why.
So it's about intention, right? Like, are they trying to manipulate you for their own gain, or are they actually trying to promote, like, a worthy cause.
Exactly. You highlighted this one study about public health campaigns. Remember those really intense anti-smoking ads? The ones that show the graphic reality of lung cancer and everything.
Oh, yeah, those were impossible to forget.
Right. Well, those were designed to evoke fear, and the study found that those kinds of emotionally charged messages, they were way more effective at getting people to quit smoking than like just presenting facts about how dangerous tobacco is.
I guess it makes sense, though. It's like those images cut through all the noise and forced people to confront the consequences of their actions. No more hiding from the truth.
Exactly. And this same principle, you see it at work in social movements throughout history.
Mm.
Remember those notes I sent about the civil rights movement? It just struck me how effectively they used powerful imagery and slogans and personal stories to really galvanize support for their cause.
Like, you can't forget those photos of peaceful protesters being attacked with fire hoses and police dogs. Those images, man, they were everywhere.
Exactly. They exposed the brutality of segregation, and they really helped to galvanize public support for the Civil Rights Act. It's a reminder that propaganda, when it's used ethically, it can actually be a really powerful force for positive change.
Wow, yeah, that's actually really inspiring. So, I mean, how do we become more discerning? How do we know if something is manipulative propaganda or if it's a legitimate attempt to promote something good?
That's the million-dollar question. It takes critical thinking, a healthy dose of skepticism and a willingness to look beyond the surface. One of the first steps is recognizing our own biases.
Oh, you mean like how we all gravitate towards information that confirms what we already believe, even if it's not true?
Exactly. We all have these mental shortcuts, right? They influence how we process information. And the thing is, skilled propagandists, they know exactly how to exploit those biases. They feed us what we want to hear to manipulate our opinions and actions.
It's like those targeted ads. They're like, hey, I know you better than you know yourself. It's kind of creepy, actually.
Right. And that's why it's so important to diversify our information sources. Don't just stay in your bubble.
So, like, don't just get your news from one place or only talk to people who agree with you all the time.
Exactly. Challenge yourself. Look at different viewpoints, even ones you might not like. Look for evidence-based reporting. Be wary of those sensationalized headlines, the ones designed to get clicks.
So, it's about being an active participant in this whole search for truth, not just a passive consumer of whatever information comes your way.
100%. And remember, it's okay to change your mind as you learn more. That's part of what critical thinking is, right? It's like this ongoing process of questioning and evaluating and refining our understanding of the world.
That reminds me, there was that article you shared about the illusory truth effect. I'd never even heard of it before.
Oh, yeah.
Basically, it said that the more we hear something repeated, even if it's not true, the more likely we are to believe it. Kind of like brainwashing, almost.
It's a classic propaganda technique. It's all about repetition, right?
Yeah.
Creating an echo chamber where the same message is just constantly reinforced.
So we need to be wary of those echo chambers, both online and in our personal lives too, surrounding ourselves with yes men, so to speak.
It's like building up a mental immune system. The more we expose ourselves to different perspectives, the less susceptible we become to being manipulated.
I like that. Building up our defenses. Okay, so we've talked about how to spot the signs of propaganda. We talked about critical thinking. But what about the people who are actually creating this stuff? Shouldn't they be held accountable somehow?
Absolutely. And that's where things get even more complicated. How do you regulate information, especially in a free society? Freedom of speech is important, but at what point does it become harmful?
Right. It's like, where do you draw the line and who decides?
Exactly. And it's not just about social media companies either. You remember we talked about the fairness doctrine, right?
Okay.
That whole thing about broadcasters having to present diverse viewpoints on controversial issues.
Yeah, I remember reading about that. Didn't that get abolished like way back in the 80s?
Yeah, but some people are saying we need something like that now more than ever. With all these hyper-partisan news channels, people are stuck in these echo chambers just hearing what they want to hear.
And that makes them easy targets for manipulation.
Right. So bringing back the fairness doctrine exactly as it was, probably not feasible. But that underlying principle, the idea that broadcasters have a responsibility to present a more balanced perspective, that's worth talking about.
So it's about making sure the public has access to a more accurate picture of what's going on, not just one side of the story.
Exactly. Now, even if we could magically solve all these problems, there's still the issue of our own vulnerability. That's where media literacy becomes crucial.
Empowering people to think for themselves. There was that one study about how even a little bit of education about propaganda techniques, it can make a huge difference. People start to see through the BS.
Exactly. Give them the tools to spot it. And it's not just about, fake news. It's about understanding how our own biases, how our brains work. All of that plays into it.
Information bias, right. That's a big one.
Huge. We all do it. Media literacy is about recognizing those biases, challenging ourselves to be open to different perspectives.
It's about being willing to be wrong, to have your mind changed, which honestly, in today's world, it's kind of a radical idea.
It's not easy, but it's essential.
And you're big on critical thinking, too. That came up a lot in your notes.
It's not just about, memorizing a bunch of facts. It's about knowing how to ask the right questions, how to evaluate evidence, how to form your own conclusions. Those are skills that apply to everything, not just navigating the media.
Right. It's bigger than that. So where do we start? How do we actually teach people to think critically? Like, how do we cultivate that?
Well, I think it starts with education. And not just in schools, but everywhere, Parents, caregivers, community leaders, we need to be teaching kids how to think critically about the information they encounter from a young age.
It's about building that foundation early on.
Yes, creating a culture where asking questions, being skeptical, it's not a bad thing. It's encouraged.
It's about walking the walk, too. We can't just talk about critical thinking. We have to model it for our kids, for everyone around us.
Absolutely. Lead by example. Show them what it looks like in action.
Okay, so to wrap this up, if there's one thing you want our listeners to take away from this, what would it be?
Don't give up hope. I know it's easy to feel overwhelmed with all this, like we're just along for the ride, but we have more power than we think. We have the power to choose what we consume, what we believe, how we engage with the world. Don't give that power away.
It's about reclaiming our agency, taking back control.
Yes. We can create a more informed, more just, more truthful world. It starts with each of us.
That's a great message. This has been a wild ride, exploring the world of propaganda.
Yeah, it's a trip.
But we'll be back in a moment to talk solutions. Don't go away. And we're back. So we've talked about the problem, this whole propaganda thing, how it works, how it messes with us. But you didn't just give us research on the problems, right? There are solutions in there too. So how do we fight back? What can we actually do?
Yeah, well, it's tricky. It's like, what's that myth? The Hydra. Cut off one head, two more grow back.
Right. So we got to get them all.
We got to try. But I think got to focus on two things. One, where's the misinformation coming from? Two, why are we so vulnerable to it in the first place?
Okay. Two-pronged attack. Let's start with the source.
Yeah.
You had that article about holding social media companies accountable. Some pretty intense ideas in there, like what if spreading disinformation, it was treated as harm, like legally, like libel, slander, that kind of thing.
It's tough, right? Because freedom of speech, huge deal, cornerstone of a democracy. But when these platforms, they're making money off of harmful content, shouldn't there be, like, some responsibility there?
Yeah, where's the line? And who gets to draw it?
Exactly. And it's not just those companies either. Remember we were talking about the fairness doctrine, the thing where broadcasters, they had to present different viewpoints?
Vaguely. Wasn't that a long time ago?
Got abolished back in the 80s. But now, with these, like, hyper-partisan news channels everywhere, people are stuck in echo chambers, just getting fed the same stuff over and over.
Makes them easy to manipulate.
Exactly. So, bringing back the fairness doctrine, exactly how it was, probably not going to happen. But the idea behind it, that broadcasters, they got to be responsible, present a balance. Worth thinking about.
Give the public the full picture, not just the side they want you to see.
100%. Now, even if we could magically fix all that, there's still us, our own brains. That's where media literacy comes in.
Teaching people to think for themselves. One of the studies you sent, it said that just a little bit of education, like knowing the tricks propaganda uses, makes people way less likely to fall for it.
Like giving everyone a BS detector. And it's not just fake news, it's knowing your own biases.
Confirmation bias, classic.
Oh yeah, we all have it. Media literacy is about recognizing that, being open to being wrong, hearing different views.
Which honestly these days feels kind of radical.
It's not easy, but crucial.
And you were big on critical thinking in your notes too.
It's the foundation of it all. Not just memorizing facts, it's asking the right questions, judging the evidence for yourself.
Taking ownership of your own conclusions, yeah. So how do we, actually teach that?
Starts young. Education, but not just schools. Parents, everyone. Kids need to learn early how to think critically about what they see, what they hear, all of it.
Build that foundation.
Exactly. Make it normal to question things, to be skeptical, It's healthy.
And we got to practice what we preach, right? We can't just talk about it. Got to be the example.
Absolutely. Actions speak louder. Always.
Okay, so final thoughts. One big takeaway from all this propaganda talk.
Don't give up hope. I know it's heavy stuff, feels like we're losing sometimes. But we have more power than we think. We choose what we let in, what we believe. Don't give that power away.
It's about taking back control.
Yes. A more informed world, a better world, it's possible. It starts with us.
Love it. Well, that was a trip, this deep dive into propaganda. Definitely eye-opening.
It's a wild world out there.
That's for sure. To all our listeners, thanks for diving in with us. Keep asking those tough questions, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.